So Hurt Business was supposed to be this big thing, right? Supposed to be this big, awesome thing with Bobby Lashley and MVP and Shelton Benjamin and maybe others. And it was kind of supposed to be the WWE version of the Beatdown Clan. And there, you know, that was a really good, really cool stable for Impact. The problem became guys like Samoa Joe and Loki started to want to leave, and then MVP ended up getting fired for having pretty unethical business practices because he brought over Hernandez while he was still under contract with Lucha Underground. Then, ironically enough, MVP signed with Lucha Underground. So there's a lot of hope for this group. You know, you got Shelton Benjamin, who everyone always says, you know, oh, he would have been a great world champion. I disagree. I think he's got the charisma of a fish. But then you have a guy who does make a great world champion, Bobby Lashley, because he's a legitimate badass. Then you got one of the best talkers the last, you know, nearly 20 years, last 15 years in MVP. It's like this group was made to succeed. It was made to get Bobby Lashley back over. It was made to be the thing that got into Brock Lesnar's way. Like, it's the perfect storyline. You know, Shelton Benjamin's Brock's ex-partner, not just in WWE, but he, you know, Shelton coached him at Minnesota. Then you got Bobby Lashley, the guy they always call Black Lesnar, the guy who everyone wanted to see fight Lesnar in both, you know, WWE, New Japan, and fucking Bellator or UFC. Never happened. So you finally have that opportunity to build to it and get WrestleMania 30, whatever the fuck we're on, because they stopped using numbers, and now I'm confused. Off to a great start with booking towards Lashley and Lesnar, or at least getting Lashley into a title scene that makes sense. But instead, yet here we are in the remnants of the Blackverse, and we're not seeing any improvements. And you got to think with guys like, you know, MVP, who's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and actually has won tournaments in it. Shelton Benjamin, one of the best wrestlers Minnesota's ever seen. Fucking Bobby Lashley, who I think only has one loss in MMA. And they're being treated like a bunch of afterthoughts. So they're losing to guys like Cedric Alexander and Mustafa Ali, guys who are literally as big as their legs. And I am confused with why this is happening. Oh, okay, they go into Raw Underground and they beat up a bunch of nobodies. Cool story. So they like to beat up strangers. That's not impressive. That's illegal. So I don't know what they're doing. It's not working.
Great. The group of black guys, they succeed better in the criminal element. Great.
Right? Like, they're Crime Time 2.0 with better suits.
Yeah, it's weird, man. It's like I said, we like Uha.
Yeah, we love Uha.
Uha in WWE. And they've had to work to get him to some form of relevance where he is right now. But he, you know, should have started off doing what he's doing now. Should have been on a completely different level by now, but, you know, I digress. We'll get to the, you know, like you said, everything 100% what you said, exactly what this crew was designed for. MVP is the talker. Now somebody like Shelton, who will work very well, you know, around the IC United States Championship thing, which they put him around. And you got Bobby, who could go, you know, obviously for like the world, something going against Brock, and having somebody like Shelton in his corner, who you would think logically booking, which, like I said, will never happen, but logically, me or you booking, it's like, okay, obviously there's a built-in thing with him and Shelton, but you can also tie back in the whole thing with the Rumble, where he thought it was going to be all hunky-dory, and obviously Brock tossed him like everybody else, so there could be a hinge of revenge to get over on the big guy using Lashley. But that's using logic, and we can't apply that to this conversation, because you got freaking Shelton having to settle with going after the damn 24/7 title, because MVP, who really shouldn't even be in action, going after the United States, or any given 1 week, it's either MVP or Lashley. They both can't beat Apollo. And neither one. So, you know, and then freaking Shelton wins the 24/7, then he struggles back and forth with Truth. He gets over on Truth, and then all of a sudden, here comes the Asian with his ninjas. And how do you expect to get any? Nobody in this situation wins. The black guys, the Oriental guys, nobody wins. And then freaking Cedric, Ricochet, and Mustafa are peripheral characters in this whole deal. And which are the very definition of three great talents floundering, charisma clearly varying. Um, but yeah, nobody wins, and this is, I think that whole scenario is the essence of that of the company's booking. You know, it's just one big shitty juggling act.
You're not wrong. We're going to double down here and go super offensive when I say this. They've made Shelton Benjamin the Black Ron Killings. Ba-dum-tsh. He's always around the belt, and it makes no sense. But unlike Ron Killings, who's super fucking entertaining with anything he's doing, apologies to him from 2011, because that little Jimmy stuff and like the Confederate flag attire and marching to fight John Cena, that's fucking gold. In hindsight, that's fucking gold. Maybe not as the lead, not as the lead feud, but like that's gold.
That's some of his all-time best stuff, man. Like classic.
Fucking Danielson kicking little Jimmy. Ron Killings running out of the ring to go console his friend. Great. So you would hope that this group would actually be booked well. It's not. They took over Raw Underground and then they left. And then they came back a month later. It's like there's no semblance of legitimacy in them anymore. And like that's the saddest part.
It's funny, and I heard somebody else talk about this, and they said it jokingly, but it's real. Like the only way that Lashley is going to even be able to sniff or touch Lesnar is if 1 week he just they go in there again to piss off their frustration of losing again to Apollo Crews. They go in there and house people like nobody else is going to step up because Shane obviously is the maestro, if you will. And Lesnar just walks in randomly. You just see the crowd thin out. People just leave like how they did in Returns when Batman showed up and everybody faded to black in Penguin's lair. And he turns around and it's Lesnar. That is the only way he's going to get him at this point.
Yeah. But even if they did, unless this becomes a shoot fight, I would just imagine Lesnar would go over pretty easily. You know?
Yeah.
Like it does not feel like they would be given the opportunity. And the thing is, I genuinely love Bobby Lashley. I know it may not always seem like it because I love Eddie Edwards, and when Bobby was on top of Impact, Eddie was also on top of Impact, so I was obviously going with Eddie because I love me some Wolves. But if it wasn't for Eddie being part of that kind of situation, I would always want Bobby to be my champion for as long as I could rock with it. You know, I wasn't a big Drew Galloway guy, so like when Bobby beat him, I was like, cool. And then Bobby loses to Alberto, I was like, why does this keep happening to me? But when it comes to Bobby Lashley, like there's always this promise of a super possibility to happen, and it never does. And it bums me out because like I know, like Marcus, if you and I were booking this shit, we would book to Lesnar, Lashley, Hell in a Cell, WrestleMania. It writes itself. You know, like, and you do it, like, and now with the parameters that are set up with, you could do it so easily with Lesnar as a face, you know, just unbelievably possibly, but yes. And like you could do it in a way where like Shelton's like, you know, Brock, you know, like, you know, you've always been my buddy, you've always looked out for me, and I'm gonna have your back. And then like Shelton betrays Brock, but like you don't do it like the night he does it like WWE plans to. Like you do the long con. Like you would introduce Shelton with Brock, you know, on his side at like Survivor Series, and then at, you know, the Royal Rumble, maybe Brock is about to get thrown out, but then Shelton tosses out Lashley right when everyone thinks that Shelton's going to turn heel, finally, and he doesn't. And then heading into the last 6 weeks of WrestleMania, then Shelton takes like a crowbar to Brock's knee, and then all of a sudden it's like, ha, we've been playing you. It's never been about the title. We don't need the title. What we want is to end the aura, the glamour of Brock Lesnar once and for all. And that's why we're doing this. And that's why it's going to be Lashley Lesnar in Hell in a Cell. And you don't even do a match leading into it. Like, there is no Lashley Lesnar 1 to set up the Hell in a Cell. There's no, like, random-ass regular match or the greatest wrestling match never to happen or whatever dumb, stupid-ass moniker the WWE would come up with. The first time they fight, Hell in a Cell. And not the goofy-ass red cage, 30 feet fucking high, 18 goddamn feet wide, where the berth between the ring and the cage is so wide you can actually have like a full listing of like tables and like caterers. There's a wedding happening on the far side of the ring, and then on the other side there's a daycare. No, we go no mercy O2 tight as fuck cage, so these two behemoths can really utilize the brutality and the essence of Hell in a Cell. But we'll never get that because they don't know how to give fans what they want anymore. Stone Cold didn't win at WrestleMania 14 because Vince was super high on him. He won because the fans were super high on him.
I mean, something like Lashley works so well against Lesnar because you need guys at this point after he's literally ran through. I mean, he literally ran through their roster in one match. I mean, he had already been doing that years prior, but specifically in one match, and it's like you need somebody that like a Keith Lee or Galloway in some instance, but specifically somebody like Lesnar who can take the fight to him at this point. Like Lesnar's a guy that attacks Brock backstage and lays him out, and people are like, wow, this guy's not to be effed with. Exactly, because he would have done that in Impact. The Lashley from Impact is taking it to Lesnar every week. Just because he's just in the mood for it. This Lashley is like, I kind of want to fight him in interviews. And then, he kind of got to mock him in interviews, and then they have a Twitter exchange. He's tweeting at Lesnar, and it's technically Paul Heyman tweeting back because we know Lesnar doesn't give any F's about social media. And then they'll make something out of that. But a Hell in a Cell between the two of them, that's 5 stars on any show, just for the kaiju of it all. And me, if we're not putting Galloway in that, you put him in the Intercontinental picture, I'll allow somebody like AJ Styles, because I don't know if they've clashed yet.
That would be interesting. They haven't, not to the best of my knowledge, unless they were on the Indies at the same time, and they may have been, because Styles didn't sign with the WWE until, 2018?
Yeah.
And McIntyre showed up in Impact, I think, in 2015, 2016, so there might have been an overlap where they met on a European show or something, but outside of that, no, I don't think they have.
You want to steal the Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to steal the show, as you're about to say, McIntyre Styles would be very interesting. I would really like to see Lesnar and Lashley actually finally feud. And not do it in a way that's hokey or gimmicky or heely, but literally just have an exchange where one day they pass each other in the hallway and Bobby says, "When are you going to stop being a bitch and actually come at me?" And then Brock's like, "Oh, it's going to be like that." And Bobby's like, "It's already like that." That's the way to set this up. And you can just have them, anytime Brock shows up, that you should have them fucking brawl. Or maybe you don't have them brawl. But you have Lashley finally hit him with that one line. And it's kind of when you think about when Undertaker and Lesnar revisited the rivalry in 2015, where they were held apart. And I think it was Brock's like, "I'm going to kill you." And Undertaker screams back, "You're going to have to." Imagine if you had saved something like that very powerful delivery to Lashley and have Brock scream, "I'm going to kill you" when we fight at WrestleMania, and Lashley just screams back, "You're going to have to." It would make him overnight. And the sad thing is we should not be talking about a 3 or 4-time former world heavyweight champion, Intercontinental and U.S. titles out the wazoo, a 13-1 MMA record, a guy who's headlined the biggest shows of the year, and say what you will about his presidency. When you get put with Donald Trump in 2007 for a WrestleMania match, that says everything about how people see you. Bobby Lashley was seen as a big deal. But we should not be saying 13 fucking years later to a 42-year-old that this is how we get you over. It should have happened a long fucking time ago. Bobby Lashley deserves better.
And I love the parallel in a lot of ways to what you said, because you talked about and that's really the perfect way to get Brock, because in real life that'll probably get his hands put on you quick, just talking smack in the hallway. But it is so much very reminiscent, because the next thing you went to was Taker and Lesnar, and I thought you was going to reference it, but I'll do it now. That kind of emanated, the embers to that kind of initiated at that UFC fight. Where he went up to Taker. Yeah, and Taker was like, "You want to go? You want to go? You want to go?" Oh, man, that was great.
They literally set up a pro wrestling angle after a real-life MMA fight. This is the dumbest fucking carny business I've ever seen. Like, it's just fucking, it's 10 pennies stupid, man. I don't even know anymore. When they're like, yeah, we did it to set up some kind of cross promotion event. Like, what would you have done if Brock had lost that fight?
It's so funny because obviously now the lines are blurred. Some people like everything's a gimmick or yeah, or everything's a work because they're like, well, I won't be worked. So I'm gonna say that it's obviously set up. But at that time, that was a real little beef between the two of them. And then eventually, I think it calmed down, and they kind of the wrestling gods or whatever aligned it to where they were both in the company, and that ended up working out. But it's funny how those kind of things come full circle. But yeah, it really would be like one day Brock just comes back, and obviously, I think at this point it may be a little awkward for him to come back with Heyman, specifically to Raw. But this is where the three of them are, and they're just passing each other in the hallway, and you get that little exchange, and that'll really kick it off. And imagine Brock going after Lesnar. Brock going after Lashley, and then the beatdown clan thing kind of comes in. The MVP Shelton and Lashley leave him leaking and laying. That's something you could build to through months because Lesnar has to be at the show every week, which he's not going to be. So.
Well, I was about to say that it would have to take months because Brock's only showing up once every 6 weeks. So if you're setting up like a 5-segment, parlay into the match, it's gonna take 30 fucking weeks. So yeah, it's gonna take half the year to get to. Oh well, we can dream, right? It's still a lot.